I'm going to tell you something that still makes my chest tighten every time I think about it. It was the night an ER resident made the worst call of his entire career, one that could have cost someone their life. And somehow, he blamed me for it. And before you assume this is just another tense shift in a chaotic emergency room, let me assure you, what happened that night changed how I see my job, my colleagues, and even myself. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to stand in the middle of a storm where one wrong decision spirals into something far more dangerous, stay with me, because I lived it. It started on a Friday night, the kind of night the ER feels like a pressure cooker. Too many people, not enough staff, phones ringing nonstop, families pacing the waiting room, monitors beeping from every direction. I'd been a nurse long enough to know the rhythm of nights like that. The rush, the unpredictable cases, the frayed tempers. But even with all that experience, nothing prepared me for the decision a certain resident was about to make. A decision I tried to stop. His name was Dr. Carter. Young, brilliant on paper, ambitious, and honestly, a little too confident for someone who had only been with us for a few months. Most new residents walk into the ER with wide eyes, humble, aware of what they don't know. Not him. He walked like he owned the place, chin up, shoulders back, ready to impress anyone who would watch. He wasn't rude, not exactly, but he had that dangerous mix of intelligence and pride that makes someone believe they're incapable of being wrong, which is already a red flag in emergency medicine. The night kicked into high gear around 9 p.m. We had a full board: respiratory distress, chest discomfort, a couple of fractures, someone who fainted in a grocery store, a child with a high fever, and several people who, we suspected, came just to avoid waiting at urgent care. In the middle of all this, the charge nurse reassigned me to help Dr. Carter with the higher acuity rooms because he'd been falling behind. I didn't mind. I'd worked with difficult personalities before. My job wasn't to be his friend. My job was to keep patients safe. Around 9:40 p.m., EMS rolled in a patient who immediately caught my attention. A man in his early 50s, sweating, breathing fast, pale but restless. He kept shifting on the stretcher, like he couldn't get comfortable. His hands were trembling, and he kept pressing them against his upper abdomen. Not quite his chest, but close enough to make me cautious. The paramedics' report wasn't dramatic. Abdominal pain, ongoing for several hours, worsening. But I've learned something important over the years. People's bodies often tell the truth before their words do. I took one look at him and felt that familiar sting of worry. It wasn't fear, it was instinct, the kind that gets sharper with each year you work in an ER. I started running through my assessment. His vitals weren't terrible, but they weren't great either. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure on the lower side of normal, oxygen saturation decent but dipping whenever he shifted. His skin was cool and damp, and he kept whispering that something didn't feel right. Not pain, not nausea, just something. I've seen that something before. It's a warning that's hard to explain, but impossible to ignore. I paged Dr. Carter. He walked in 3 minutes later, wearing that confident expression he always carried, the one that suggested he had everything under control before he even heard the situation. I gave him a rundown, careful and precise, highlighting what concerned me. He nodded, looked the patient over, and asked a few questions. The patient answered calmly, but I noticed the wince that appeared every time he inhaled a little too deeply. His breathing wasn't labored, yet, but it had a tension to it. "Looks like gastritis," Dr. Carter finally said, almost casually. "We'll give him something for discomfort and fluids. He'll be fine." My stomach tightened. Something was off. I could feel it. I didn't want to challenge him outright. There's a delicate balance between advocating and offending when working with certain personalities. But I wasn't going to stay silent either. "Doctor," I said carefully, "his discomfort pattern and appearance don't match simple gastritis. I think we need to run something more comprehensive. Maybe labs and..." "He doesn't need labs," His tone was clipped, dismissive. He didn't even look at me when he said it. "This is straightforward." "No," I said, firmer now. "It's not. His vitals aren't stable enough for us to brush this off, and he keeps saying he feels like something is wrong." Dr. Carter sighed, the dramatic kind that people do when they think someone is being overly cautious. "You're overinterpreting it. He's anxious. Let's rehydrate him and reassess." I felt heat rising in my chest, but I kept control. "Doctor, this patient isn't anxious. He's compensating. Something's brewing. His skin is clammy, his pressure is trending downward, and his breathing pattern changed twice in the past 10 minutes. Still nothing. He wasn't hearing me. He was hearing a challenge. And in the ER, ego is a silent danger. But as a nurse, you learn to pick your battles, strategically. If you confront someone too aggressively, they dig in deeper. If you push too little, the patient suffers. So I decided to try again. "Look at him," I said, keeping my voice calm, steady. "Something's happening. We should get labs and consider imaging, at least an EKG." That last part struck a nerve. He straightened slightly. EKG meant possible cardiac involvement, something no resident wanted to miss, but also something they didn't want to over-order without reason. "He's not having a cardiac issue," Dr. Carter insisted. "He doesn't fit the profile." The profile? As if people always follow a rule book. I opened my mouth to press harder, but before I could, he waved a hand dismissively and walked out, calling over his shoulder. "Start the fluids. I'll be back." I stared at the doorway long after he disappeared. The patient looked up at me, eyes uneasy. "Am I okay?" he whispered. I forced a reassuring smile. "You're in the right place. And I'm keeping a close eye on you." But inside, I felt a knot tightening. I started the fluids, but I didn't stop there. I monitored him intensely, silently tracking every subtle shift. The tremors in his hands grew worse. His breathing speed increased by a few breaths per minute. He kept pressing harder into his abdomen, and his blood pressure? Slowly trending down, one number at a time. 5 points lower, then 8, then 12. This wasn't gastritis. I knew it. Every cell in my body knew it. Finally, at 10:15 p.m., I paged Dr. Carter again, more urgently this time. He came in visibly annoyed. "What is it now?" he asked. I ignored the tone. "His vitals are changing. We need labs. Something serious is happening." He checked the monitor, barely glancing at the man. "It's just discomfort causing stress responses." "No," I said firmly. "This is not stress." He let out another frustrated sigh. "Fine. If it'll make you feel better, order the labs." He said it like I was asking for excessive testing, not basic standard workup. But he didn't order an EKG, and he didn't order imaging. "Doctor, we really should—" "No," he cut me off. "We wait." It was the worst decision of his career, and deep down, I think some part of him already knew it. By 10:40 p.m., everything changed. The patient's monitor alerted us to a sudden shift, pressure dropping faster now, heart rate jumping, oxygen dipping. He grimaced, clutched his upper abdomen, and whispered something I'll never forget. "It feels like something inside me is tearing." My heart nearly stopped. That was not gastritis. That was not indigestion. That was something catastrophic. I hit the rapid response button before I even called for Dr. Carter. The room erupted into motion. Another resident rushed over. A senior attending appeared within seconds. Suddenly, the environment felt like organized chaos. Everyone moving fast, voices tight with urgency. "Get an EKG! Start second IV access! Call imaging stat! Get the crash cart near the door!" My hands moved without hesitation. I'd been in situations like this before, but this one felt different. Not because it was more intense, but because it was preventable. The EKG showed abnormalities immediately. Imaging confirmed the rest. The patient wasn't dealing with simple abdominal pain. He was experiencing a serious internal crisis, one that required immediate intervention. And the delay? The delay had consequences. The attending cut through the tension like a blade. "Why wasn't this identified earlier?" he demanded sharply. The room fell silent. I didn't look at Dr. Carter, but I felt the shift in the air as everyone did. His voice cracked before he steadied it. The nurse didn't report any concerning changes until recently. I froze. For a split second, I genuinely couldn't tell if I'd heard him correctly. Did he really just... Yes. Yes, he did. He blamed me. He blamed me to save himself. I felt something cold spread in my chest. Shock, anger, disbelief. But I didn't speak. Not yet. Because in that moment, the patient needed us more than I needed justice. We stabilized him enough to transfer him to surgery. The hallway felt endless as I pushed the stretcher alongside the team, the air thick with tension and urgency. When he disappeared behind the OR doors, the surge of adrenaline faded, leaving something heavier behind. That was when everything truly began. Because the truth always comes out in the ER. But the way it comes out, that's the part that still haunts me. When the OR doors closed, I finally let myself breathe, but the air still felt heavy, like the entire night was pressing down on my shoulders. I walked back toward the main ER hallway, and the lights suddenly felt too bright. The noise was too sharp. Every passing conversation sounded distant, muted, unimportant compared to what had just happened. I headed toward the supply room just to have a moment alone, but when I turned the corner, I saw Dr. Carter already there, leaning against the counter, rubbing his forehead like he was the one who had suffered through the chaos. He looked up the second he noticed me. His expression shifted from exhaustion to something defensive, maybe even resentful, and I knew right then we weren't done. Not even close. "We need to talk," I said quietly. He straightened, but instead of looking nervous or remorseful, he crossed his arms. "If this is about earlier, we both know things escalated fast. I didn't have all the information." "You had everything I gave you," I replied, keeping my voice even. "And you dismissed all of it." His jaw tightened. "I made a clinical judgment. You've been a nurse long enough to know not everything is obvious." "That's exactly why we investigate," I said. "You ignored every warning sign." He shook his head, frustration flashing in his eyes. "Look, what happened wasn't ideal, but when the attending asked, I wasn't going to throw myself under the bus. It's my career on the line." I stared at him for a moment, stunned by how casually he said it. "So instead you threw me," I said. "You blamed me for not reporting things I documented and paged you about twice." He looked away, as if trying to convince himself he had made the right call. "I didn't say you didn't report anything. I said you didn't report enough." "There is no enough when you ignore everything," I snapped before I could stop myself. I took a breath, forcing my voice back down. "You know what the worst part is? You made a mistake. Everybody does. But instead of owning it, you turned it into my fault." He didn't respond. Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable, like a fog neither of us wanted to step into. "You endangered him?" I said. "And then you endangered me by lying." He looked at me then, really looked at me, like the weight of what he'd done was finally reaching him. But the remorse lasted only a heartbeat before the wall of pride went back up. "I didn't lie," I clarified the timeline. I almost laughed from disbelief, but it wasn't funny, not even remotely. "I charted everything," I said. "Every warning, every change in vitals, every page to you. The timeline is written." His face paled, and for a moment, he understood what that meant. My documentation wasn't emotional, wasn't interpretive, wasn't subjective. It was fact. And unlike people, facts don't crumble under pressure. Before he could respond, the charge nurse stepped in. "They need both of you in the conference room," she said. "Now." My chest tightened. This was it, the fallout. I followed her down the hall with Dr. Carter walking stiffly beside me, neither of us speaking. The conference room door was open, and inside sat the attending physician, the medical director, and the night supervisor. I had been in debriefings before, but not like this. As soon as we walked in, every pair of eyes focused on us. The attending looked exhausted from the emergency, but sharper now, more analytical. He gestured for us to sit. "We're trying to understand the delay in recognition," he began. "We've reviewed some initial documentation, and there are inconsistencies between what was verbally reported and what was charted." My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression steady. The medical director turned to me first. "Nurse," he said, "walk us through your timeline." I did. Clearly, concisely, without embellishment. I described the paramedic's initial report, the patient's appearance, the vital trends, his comments about feeling that something was wrong, every assessment I performed, and every page I sent to Dr. Carter, including the times, which I remembered because I always charted immediately. The room was silent for a moment after I finished. Then the attending turned toward Dr. Carter. "And your reasoning for not ordering basic labs or an EKG?" Dr. Carter hesitated, and I could practically feel the fear radiating off him. Not fear for the patient, but fear for himself. "I didn't think it was necessary," he said finally. "And the situation was described less urgently than it appears now." The attending raised an eyebrow. "Less urgently? Her charting says otherwise." The medical director nodded. "And we confirmed her pages through the system log." The color drained from Dr. Carter's face. There it was. Undeniable. I felt no satisfaction in watching him shrink under the truth. This wasn't about revenge. I didn't want anything bad to happen to him. I just wanted him to own what he did. But he couldn't. Instead, he whispered, barely audible, "I thought she was being overly cautious." The attending leaned forward. "Overly cautious saves lives. Underestimating risk does not. And your instinct should have told you that a patient who looks unstable, even without classic textbook symptoms, deserves investigation, not dismissal." The medical director spoke next, his tone firmer. "You're not being reprimanded for making a mistake. You're being reprimanded for refusing to consider the nurse's input and then misrepresenting the situation. That behavior is unacceptable." I looked down briefly, not out of guilt, but relief someone finally said it out loud. My voice didn't matter to him, but documentation did. Logs did. Accountability did. Dr. Carter bowed his head, but whether out of shame or self-pity, I wasn't sure. The meeting lasted another 10 minutes. Policies were reviewed. Expectations were clarified. And by the time we were dismissed, the entire dynamic between us had shifted. When we stepped out into the hallway, he stopped and turned toward me. His expression wasn't angry anymore. It was hollow. "Why couldn't you just let it go?" he asked quietly, almost pleadingly. I held his gaze. Because letting it go would mean pretending a dangerous choice was acceptable. And it wasn't. He blinked, stunned, maybe realizing for the first time how deeply his pride had cut into the safety of the people he was supposed to care for. He walked away without another word. I didn't chase him. The rest of the night blurred together. Routine cases, families waiting nervously, the usual stream of human vulnerability that flows through the ER nonstop. But something felt different inside me. My hands still moved with confidence and purpose, but emotionally, I carried the weight of the confrontation like a lead blanket. Hours later, around 4 a.m., surgery called with an update. The patient had made it through. He wasn't out of danger yet, but he was stable. He was alive because the team acted quickly when the crisis finally revealed itself. But the delay had made everything far more complicated than it should have been. I thanked the surgeon for the update, hung up the phone, and leaned against the counter. My shoulders loosened for the first time that night. I closed my eyes, letting the relief sink in. The patient wasn't the only one who learned something that night. I learned something too. I learned that sometimes, even when you advocate, even when you speak up, even when you document everything, people can still try to twist the truth to protect themselves. But I also learned that the truth has its own way of rising. In emergency medicine, ego should never guide decisions. But it does sometimes. And when it does, the consequences ripple outward, touching people who had nothing to do with the mistake. Nurses are often the ones who stand in those ripples. But I don't regret advocating, not for a second, because if I hadn't spoken up twice, that patient might not have survived long enough to make it to the OR. And no amount of workplace conflict is more important than someone's life. As the sun started rising outside the ER windows, casting a pale glow across the waiting room floor, I finally sat down for the first time all night. My legs ached, my head throbbed, and my heart felt heavy, but steady. Dr. Carter avoided me for weeks after that shift. Eventually, he apologized. Not fully, not in the way I wish he had, but enough for me to see he was trying to grow past it. Sometimes growth comes slowly, sometimes painfully, sometimes only after someone else stands firm. And if there's one thing I hope people understand from nights like that, it's this: listening saves lives. Pride puts them at risk. I wasn't the hero of that night. I was just someone who refused to stay silent. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. Thank you for listening to my story. If you appreciated hearing what real ER nights can be like, consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who enjoys intense, true-to-life medical stories. Your support means more than you know.